Hello, I'm Simon Whistler, you're watching TopTenz Net, and in the video today, we're looking at the top 10 strange things TSA agents have found in luggage. Number 10. Snakes on a plane?
So it appears that the saying snakes on a plane isn't just one from a silly Samuel L. Jackson movie. If a man flying out of Miami International Airport had gotten his way, there really would have been snakes on the plane he was planning to board on its way to Brazil. It seems that in August 2011, an unidentified man attempted to walk through a body scanner at an airport with 7 small snakes, all tied up separately in nylons in his pants pockets. TSA agents immediately noticed that something was the matter and told the man that he had to empty his pockets of all items before walking through the body scanner. When he refused, it made evident that he had something dangerous in his pockets. Once apprehended and questioned, he told police what was in his pockets: 7 small snakes and 3 baby tortoises. The small animals were taken by the US Department of Fish and Wildlife and the man was arrested. What's more, it seems that this isn't the only time that someone had tried to put snakes in their pants. In Arizona, a man stole several snakes from a wildlife store by putting them in his shorts. He was later caught and arrested for theft. The question still remains, though, who would want to put live snakes in their pockets to begin with? The thought alone is insanely creepy.
Number 9. A harmless science project, or an explosive.
This entry is actually a complete and total misunderstanding, but it's a misunderstanding that essentially shut down an entire airport for hours until it was rectified. What was completely innocent ended up being a huge debacle that gained national news attention. A college student was flying out of Omaha, Nebraska, and he decided he was going to bring his makeshift homemade science project with him. Well, it just so happens that when he was going through security, the X-ray monitors picked up on the project in his carry-on bag and TSA became alerted to its suspicious nature. Once TSA took a closer look, they surmised that what they saw looked suspiciously like an explosive device. Because the TSA agents are not authorized to thoroughly search a device that they believe could be a bomb, both FBI agents and the bomb squad were called to the scene. Not only that, but a good part of the airport was evacuated and flights were delayed indefinitely. Once the bomb squad verified that it was in fact a harmless science project and not a bomb, everything returned back to normal, but not without being a very memorable and hectic day for the people who happened to be in that airport. So, moral of the story for this particular entry, don't try to fly with your science project. There's a very good chance you may be mistaken for a terrorist.
Number 8. Grenade launcher.
What's interesting about this entry is that it was actually found in checked baggage, not carry-on baggage. But TSA agents can never be too careful, as they have the well-being and safety of so many people to take into account. It seems that popular and ordinary weapons such as guns make quite a bit of an impact every single day in airports around the country. It is said that over 1,306 guns were confiscated in the year of 2011 alone. That's at least 4 guns per day. While something like grenades and grenade launchers are found less commonly, they are still items that have been taken from various passengers trying to stealthily hide them in luggage. In Seattle, one man thought that packing a grenade launcher in his checked luggage was no big deal. Now, while registered firearms are permitted in checked luggage, its presence must be stated at check-in. Grenade launchers are not considered ordinary firearms, so the launcher was confiscated and not returned to the individual. Here's a friendly tip: don't pack anything that could be considered a bomb or something that could potentially be used as a weapon in a war.
Number 7. Gassed up chainsaw.
This entry seems almost completely peculiar and bizarre in nature, because why on earth would someone need to fly with a chainsaw in the first place? Too many viewings of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre would undoubtedly elicit intense fear where chainsaws are concerned, but seeing one in a checked bag heading out of New York would cause some concern. But what's fascinating about this particular entry is that chainsaws are allowed in checked luggage, but just like with registered guns, the airline has to be notified about them up front. However, there are 2 problems with this specific instance. One was that the owner did not make the chainsaw's presence known, and the other was that it was fully gassed. Now, this is problematic and potentially dangerous for a number of reasons. One is that the amount of gas, a combustible liquid, could potentially blow up the plane. Another is that chainsaws only have the capacity and ability to work when they are gassed. This means that anyone who has access to that suitcase could have access to a very scary, deadly weapon. For those reasons alone, the chainsaw was removed from the luggage and not allowed on the plane.
Number 6. Stun gun disguised as cell phone.
The most dangerous items on this list are probably the ones that are incredibly harmful and even deadly but are being hid or disguised as something regular and ordinary. Take what looked to be a cell phone in Indianapolis but turned out to be something very different and very dangerous. Thousands of cell phones enter both airports and planes every single day all over this country, but during an ordinary day in 2011, someone tried to get past a security checkpoint with what appeared to be a pink cell phone that was actually a stun gun. Items that are deliberately made in an attempt to conceal their true identity are not only scary, but also unsettling because the person was knowingly trying to carry something harmful onto a plane. The safety and security of people on board of flights is of paramount importance, and someone who knowingly and willfully attempts to board a flight with something that is purposefully disguised as something else may want to do significant harm to the people on the flight. Thank goodness for the technology that can decipher a regular cell phone from a weapon.
Number 5. Fireworks in the sky.
While fireworks are literally meant for the sky, they aren't necessarily meant for the inside of a plane. What's more is that fireworks, just like anything with explosive material or gas associated with it, would automatically be banned and prohibited in airplanes. If people aren't allowed to smoke on an airplane, what in the world would possess anyone to think that it was okay to try and smuggle fireworks onto an airplane? In Philadelphia, a 29-year-old man thought that putting unlit fireworks in his carry-on along with flash powder wouldn't be a problem. What makes the issue even more suspect and asinine is that the fireworks were homemade M80s, which essentially made them illegal. This attempt was regarded as incredibly serious, and the man was arrested for trying to smuggle his fireworks and carry out a calculated plan to cause harm to passengers. The suspect even went so far as to cover the water bottle that contained the flash powder with black tape. This was done as a means to obstruct outside eyes from seeing the contents inside. Luckily, the scanners and x-rays that are used to check luggage are state-of-the-art.
Number 4. Novelty Swords.
This sounds really bizarre, almost as if this entry is from some ancient Roman time when sword fighting and jousting were customary and an essential way of life. Well, it seems that swords from hundreds of years ago need to be transported from place to place just like everything else. However, trying to board an airplane with them stashed in a guitar case isn't the way to make that happen. In Salt Lake City, an unidentified man thought it would be a good idea to try and hide his novelty swords in a guitar carrier, as if the x-ray wouldn't clearly pick up on them when it was being checked. When questioned about the swords, the man claimed to have no idea swords weren't allowed in carry-on luggage and, by extension, on the plane. Yes, because it makes sense that anyone and everyone could bring something as dangerous and deadly as a sharp sword onto an airplane. Just in case a sword fight breaks out, one should be prepared. If you need to transport weapons, regardless if they are novelty ones made to be souvenirs, think of a better and safer plan to get them where they need to be.
Number 3. Live eels in checked luggage.
There must be a good reason why someone would try to transport any living, breathing organism by luggage without taking the appropriate and necessary precautions. But apparently a man flying out of Miami International Airport found nothing wrong with literally lining one of his checked bags with live eels, coral, tropical fish, and invertebrates. Even though the man did pack all of the organisms in water, they were in no way secure from spillage or any other issue that could have possibly happened when live fish are being transported. What was this guy even doing in the first place? Trying to get all the components for his dream aquarium? If that was the case, he should have thought of an alternative way to have them shipped to him, because once TSA discovered what was in his bag, they immediately confiscated it and handed it over to US Fish and Wildlife Services. So it looks like Flounder and friends didn't reach the destination that the man had originally intended. What's worse is because of lack of planning and foresight, he undoubtedly lost a big investment, as most of those fish and organic organisms are incredibly expensive and some of them are rare. Better luck next time.
Number 2. Comb knife or knife comb.
Again, specific items that are purposefully disguised as something else are the most unsettling because the person to whom it belongs is willfully trying to hide the true nature of the object. Now, this is usually preferred and even encouraged with certain defense items that are generally marketed to women, but when going through the security checkpoint in an airport, everything must be as it seems. If something is being hidden or passed off as something that it's not, it automatically raises red flags to the TSA agents, especially if the item is a weapon or something potentially very dangerous. In Portland, TSA agents found what looked to be like a regular comb in a man's carry-on luggage. However, there was something strange about the top half of the comb when it went through the x-ray. Upon further investigation, it was found that the comb was actually a front, and a long knife hid below the top portion of the plastic. So what looked like a harmless grooming tool was actually a dangerous dagger. Now, it's possible that this man had no intention of actually using this knife if he had made it through TSA undetected, but the reason why security precautions are so heavy and held to the letter is to prevent terrible atrocities and people losing their lives or being physically or psychologically injured in altercations.
Number 1. Razor blades in jeans.
What's rather interesting is the fact that most of the people that try to get away with hiding prohibited items in their luggage by means of covering them up know that they aren't allowed, but they somehow think that they can figure out a way to be smarter than the TSA agents or the actual machine that is used to check their bags. In Chicago, a man put his carry-on bag through the X-ray to get checked, and what the TSA agent found looked suspicious, but they weren't quite sure what it was. Calling for backup, the agent had several other agents look at the monitor before checking the bag itself. It turns out the passenger had stuck razor blades in the lining of his jeans, folded them up, and put the garment in the carry-on bag as if they were just a regular, ordinary, non-threatening pair of clothing. After further investigation, the razor blades were found and confiscated.
So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did like it, please give us a thumbs up below and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Also, over there on the right, a couple of other videos you might enjoy if you enjoyed this one, and thank you for watching.